Okay. Hello, hello. Come on in. Join on in. Find your seats in the auditorium. Get comfortable. And we'll start in just a few minutes here. Wait for some people to trickle in. I know we're all important people and we have meetings, and we'll give some time so people can come in. Yeah, let us know where you're from in the chat. Hey, Kayla. It's always nice to see where everybody is from. You know, Zeplin is a global community with over 5 million users. So it's always great to see where across the world everybody is joining in from. It's always fun. Washington, yes, beautiful. The gorge in Washington, on the border of Washington and Oregon, is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Portugal, nice. Maybe we have some Ronaldo fans in the chat. Karina. Manhattan, love New York. Oakland, yeah. So Zeppelin is based. We're based in San Francisco. So hello to all the San Franciscans if you're joining. But we're actually founded in Turkey. So we have some roots in Turkey and some roots in San Francisco too. Hey, Steve. Hey, Jessica. Hey, Anna, Cassie, Laura. Good to meet all of you. Okay, so just some Zoom logistics. I'm sure everybody here is very familiar with Zoom by now. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, if you have questions during the webinar, just make sure to put them in the Q&A portion. So June here will help out answering some questions, and then hopefully I can take some live too. But yeah, and then in the chat, you know, if you want to share some of your experiences with some of the things I'm going to show today about components, I would love to kind of facilitate a peer-to-peer learning environment here. All right. Great. Hey, Rick. Oh, whoops. Not Slack. Whoa. Fantastic. So who am I? I'm Mike from Zeplin. I work on what's called the community team here at Zeplin. A lot of what we do on the community team is just finding stories in the wild. So talking to power users of Zeplin, understand how they're using our tool, and then we like to share those stories with the rest of the community. So a little plug here, if you do have good stories, if you have interesting use cases about flows or sections or components like we're going to talk today, go ahead and reach out to me. Yeah, maybe you'll be on one of these webinars in no time. So yeah, mike@zeplin.io. You can email me, and I would love to hear your stories. All right, today we're going to talk about some of the recent releases that we had. We had surfacing components, which was released a couple months or last year. We have documenting components more easily, which was just released a couple days ago. And then understanding the dependencies of these components in a screen view. So that's what we're going to overview today. Hope I can teach you something. Great. So let's get started here. Here we just have a couple screens in my design tool, and this is obviously Figma, but a lot of the same tenets apply for Sketch or Adobe XD. which Zeplin supports, and I'm sure a lot of you are using. And, recently at Zeplin, we've been hearing that people are having difficulty understanding what is and what is not a component on their screens. So after I'm done designing my screen and I pass it off to development, it's very important to communicate what are the building blocks, what are the components on these screens. And the way that I can see that in my design tool today is I can hover over the layers and I'll get these overlays. This purple one here is showing me that this is a component and the blue one is no component. Or I can click around the different layers to do some kind of detective work. One of the issues that we heard about here is, the components are hidden when you just look at the screen. And so I have to do some Where's Waldo work to figure out what is and what isn't a component. Not only that, but when you're working with a plethora of screens, then, clicking around on 10, 20, 100 screens to find these components, it can be monotonous and difficult, right? And you might say, well, hey, Mike, you can actually look at just the layer list on the left-hand side, and that's probably an easier way to find the components. And that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So on the left-hand side here, I can open up this screen and I can hover over the different elements. I'll just click out so you can see it more easily. And you can see here that as I hover over, I can see what is and what isn't a component. And the issues that we heard about there that, even just in this view right here, if I'm a dev or I'm not familiar with design tools, there's no real concept of layer lists in development. So I might not know that, hey, even I have to just, hover over right here to pop open the ability to see all the elements of this screen right there. And not only that, but when I was hovering over these different layers, we have this list item profiles here. And this isn't a component. But when I pop it open, oh, wait a second, this is a component. And this layer is composed of a couple different components. And actually within that, there's more components too. So once again, not only is it hidden from my view initially, but I have to do that clicking over and over again. And when you're doing that tons of times, it can be a little burdensome. So that was the problem we're facing today, is that when you're looking at a screen, there's no way in your tools that you can just see, hey, these are all the building blocks of my screen. So we wanted to change that. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Zeplin here. I'm just in the dashboard view. So I'm in a project, and if you're not familiar, this is where all of my screens are. And here we have that same screen on the left-hand side that we were just checking out. Let's hop into it. So before in Zeplin, you had to do a similar thing where you would click around, we'd give you these blue headers, and that was the way that you understood what was and what wasn't a component. But we added this drop down here. And you can see it says hide components. If I open this drop down, what I can do is I can actually show all the components on the screen. Drum roll, please. Boom, there we go. So now instantly, I can understand all the constituent parts of this screen. I can understand what is and what isn't a component right here in this view. And so there's no clicking around, there's no detective work to understand. Basically, I just click this drop down and boom, I have all the components on my screen. So I just want to take a second. I know it's a simple feature, but I think it's a really powerful one. that when you're passing these off from design to development, it's going to save you a ton of time as a developer to see all these building blocks of your screen instantly with a simple toggle. Let's just see if we have. Okay, Kayla said that these screens are making them hungry. Yeah, they're pretty delicious. Maybe next time I'll choose a different screen so that you're not too hungry when you're watching me demo here. Okay, great. So that's the first piece here. It's just surfacing all the components easily on the screen. Next, I want to show a little bit more of a complicated use case and how we at Zeplin have decided to categorize components now. And so I'm just going to use the jump feature in Zeplin. It's Command J. And this allows you to jump to a couple different things. I'm just going to jump to a particular screen that I know I'm headed to. Sorry, Kayla, there's more baklava on the screen. So more food demoing, maybe grab a snack so you're not starving here. And then I'm going to use a shortcut just to show all the components on the screen. On a Mac, it's Option Command C, and boom, there we go. So the interesting thing here is that we have those blue overlays that we saw on the last screen, but we're getting a couple different overlays here too. We have this gray overlay, and we also have this green overlay. And just to set the stage here, one of the things that we're hearing at Zeplin was it's difficult to understand the status of a component. So is this component a part of my design system? Is this maybe a custom or one-off component? Maybe it needs to be added to my core library. Or is this component developed? And do I have it somewhere? And that's the problem that we're trying to solve with these different overlays. So I just want to show you, if I click into this blue overlay, on the right-hand side, you can see that this component is in my local style guide. And the style guide being the repository for your design system, colors, spacing, textiles, and components. If I click on this gray layer, I get this interesting notification. It tells me on the right-hand side, hey, this is from your Figma file. So it actually hasn't been exported into my style guide in Zeplin or my design system, but this is a component in your design file. So maybe this tells me as a developer, hey, this isn't a part of my core library. So maybe I should, not code it in a reusable way or share it in a reusable way. Or maybe I need to talk to my team about if this is or isn't a part of that core design system. Finally, on the green overlay, this is a part of my design system, but it's also connected to code. So here it's connected through Storybook. I can open a link directly to Storybook, and I can also see the path and then some properties of this button. So this is a primary button with an icon, and the variant is obviously primary. Okay, so those are the different color coordinated ways that you can understand what the status of your component is. Is it a part of my design system? Is this a one-off component? Or is this coded somewhere? And it makes you it allows you to make better decisions as a developer. So go grab this from my repository, or maybe ask if, hey, is this supposed to be a part of our core library, or is this one of those one-off components? But we wanted to give you that information up front. Okay. The other thing I wanted to call out here is in this blue overlay, you can see that there's other components within this larger component here. And this is important too, because as a dev, you know, the kind of gold standard today is that componentized workflow, obviously, and especially in frameworks like React, components can make up an entire screen, right? So it's often important to understand not only what is a component, but what components make up that larger component. And you can see here with those overlays, we give you that information. Great. I just want to jump to one more screen here and show everybody what it looks like when the vast majority of a screen is a component. So this is fairly common here, and something you're probably familiar with too. All right. Just going to take a second to look at the chat here. Okay, it looks like Birchu and June are helping Steve out. Steve, we can definitely get you a deep dive on Storybook from a designer and developer perspective. Cool. All right, let's go back to our original market screen. So that was surfacing components, and that was understanding the different types of components that are on your screen. Now I want to talk about component dependencies. And we're going to just select this button that we were looking at before. You know, when you're designing or you're developing a screen, oftentimes it's important to understand where this component is used. So what screens it's used in and what those screens look like. And that's important for a couple different reasons. One is that if you change this component, say you make it bigger or you change the color, it's going to have cascading effects on the other screens that this component is used in. And it's important to understand those dependencies when you're changing these components. So we wanted to give you that bird's eye view. On the right-hand side here, you can see once again that we're giving you that information about what type of component this is. We're giving you some information about the properties of this component. So if it's primary, this Boolean about an icon and what state this component is in. And then finally, we're giving you information about where this screen is used. So you can see here, it's used in 11 screens in this project. And not only that, but variants of this button are used across 5 other screens. And that's kind of interesting. What do we mean by variants? I just want to show you really quickly what a button variant looks like in Zeplin. So we're going to click this button on the right-hand side, navigate to our style guide. Like I mentioned earlier, the style guide is the repository for your colors, for your text styles, your spacing, and then finally, you guessed it, your components. And here we have that button that we were just looking at. But oftentimes in design and development, these buttons will actually be a lot of different kinds of buttons. So we see here that we have a secondary button. We have a disabled button. And we have some press buttons with and without icons. I can also filter on the variant type here. So if I want to see maybe only my primary buttons, maybe the ones that don't have icons and only my press state, then I can do that here. But I just want to give you a flavor of what these variants look like in Zeplin. Okay, so this beautiful orange button that we have here is used in 11 screens, and its variants are used in a couple others. If we click this button on the right-hand side, we can actually see all the different screens that this button is used in. And I love this actually. I get this handy notification that, hey, you're in this screen, by the way. It's like when you're looking at those maps in cities and it says you're here, it's essentially what we're giving you here in Zeplin. But this is great. So I can see all the screens that this button is used in. And so say if I change the size of this button, maybe it's going to overlay other elements in a different screen, or it's going to block something. Maybe if I change the color, say to a light blue, there might be some accessibility concerns that I need to think about. So there's not enough contrast between that blue I chose for this button and a different screen that has maybe a light blue background. But I can research and understand all those things in these screens on the right-hand side. Okay. Great. The last thing I want to mention on this view is that you can also toggle the different types of this variant. So here we see we're looking at the state default, but I can actually change that to any, and we can see that the number of screens updates. I can change this icon to any. And once again, if I want to look at all my primary, all my secondary buttons that this screen is used in, I can do that too. We can actually see that this button is used across 53 screens, right? That's a lot, and that's a lot to consider when you're making changes to a button that is so ubiquitous across all of your screens. Fantastic. Okay. So that's dependencies. That's understanding the dependencies of your components. And I just want to mention really quickly here that these things that we're showing you, they're not really possible in design tools. So understanding where these components are used, there's no concept of these in the different design tools. Okay, great. How's everybody feeling? Good? Excited? Cool. The final thing that I want to show today is how to more easily document your components across screens. Sorry, I just want to stop here. Janet is asking, can we use XD component variants in the Zeplin style guides? So Janet, yes, you can. Basically, across Sketch, across XD, and Figma, what you can do, and no matter what, if the tool has a concept of button states or button variants, you can export those into Zeplin, and then you can organize those in the style guide. There is some variation between what we support between the different tools too. Okay, so one problem that we heard with components is that when you add a note to a component, that note stays on that one single screen. But maybe it's something like a requirement or an endpoint or a behavior, and that's applicable across all the different screens. So we just saw that that button we were checking out is used in 53 screens. Well, if there's something that is fundamental to that button that maybe we're changing, updating, or documenting, that should be surfaced across all the screens that button is used in. And in design tools today, it's difficult to get that kind of worldwide view for your component and document it in that way. Usually comments are siloed to a single screen. So we had heard that was an issue, and we wanted to solve it. So what you can do, and we actually just added annotations back in January, but to add an annotation and to document your components, you can click this little icon at the bottom, or you can just command click on Mac. You can select an annotation or a comment. Here we're going to be doing annotation because those are the ones that you can use to document components. And then you can choose a type. So if it's a behavior on a screen, maybe it's an animation, some kind of tracking, an endpoint, a requirement, you can notify your team about what this documentation piece really is. And so here we have this cool little component. Maybe the images that pop up are the most recent searches of the user. If no recent searches, then use 4 most popular items. So just some requirements, some documentation about this particular button and its behavior related to how this user is using searches. And then if there's no history for that, maybe they're a new user, then, you know, what is a developer? How do I know what to show in this image stack? And we're clarifying that here. So to link it to a component, I just click that link to component and I select this item profile and cell, and then I can post it. What's cool now is that if we go over to the screens that this component is used in, and we select an entirely different screen, guess what happens? Boom, there we go. That's that requirement that I just added on a separate screen on that component, and now it's showing up in this other screen. So there's no need to go across a bunch of different screens, add notes, document them. With linking to components, you can document this component once, and you can surface it across all the screens with that component in that project. So it should save you a lot of time. And I know too that there's documenting, you know, in Notion for components or Storybook or a couple different tools. But in those tools, you can kind of lose the context of the screen. So maybe the component itself is siloed, and it's not in the context of the screen, or other pieces of the handoff process is being lost. So this is a way to document your components across screens in context. Great. I know we're at 9:59. I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. It looks like Esther, June, Birchu have been answering all the questions. If we didn't get to your questions, we have an amazing support team. They're real people, they're experienced Zeplin users, and they are good. You can reach out to them at any time. You don't have to have any special plan or anything with Zeplin. They will help you. They'll walk you through workflows. I cannot recommend our support team enough. They're absolute rock stars. Okay, we'll be sending out the recording. Thank you everybody for joining. Clinton, Pedro, Willis, Johnson, Steve, Sarah, thank you all. And Janet, thank you. We'll see you soon. And yeah, once again, let me know if you have stories, and maybe it'll be me and you next time. Okay, great. Thanks everybody. Bye.